how God buried him. The mere mention of the name Moses arouses different images in the minds of various folks. The death of Moses is shrouded in some mystery in the Bible. We know he died at the age of 120, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. Despite his age, Moses was still in his prime when he was called home. Moses was barred from entering the Promised Land because of his disobedience at the waters of Meribah Kadesh. He led the Israelites to the very edge of Canaan and was given a glimpse of the land, but he was not permitted to enter it. At the end of Moses' life, God gave Moses a glimpse of the land he had left Egypt for. Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah. Mount Pisgah has a summit elevation of 4,500 feet, and that's nearly a mile. There aren't many 120-year-old men who can climb a mountain nearly a mile high and live to tell the tale. However, Moses could. He managed it by scrambling hand over hand. There was no trail wide enough for Moses, and he didn't need one anyway. If you're wondering what condition he was in, that feat will tell you. Yet here was Moses, nearly a century and a quarter old, climbing to the top of a 4,500-foot-high peak and having a great time once there. Moses is not full of self-pity. He knew he would pass away since God had told him so, and the Lord had already set another man, Joshua, in his stead before he died. The weighty responsibility of guiding the nation was lifted from his shoulders for the very first time in the last 40 years of his life. Moses could take each step on the slope in stride with lightened shoulders. He was well aware that he was about to take his final breath at any moment. When it comes to the subject of death, Moses teaches us that a believer has no reason to be afraid or to rush out into the streets in a panicked state. Death is an inevitable part of existence for each and every one of us. Before we are truly prepared to live, we must first be prepared to pass away. Therefore, when we are ready to pass away, let us not delay and immediately do it. Imagine the breathtaking view that was spread out before him. Moses looked out, and the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, and all Naphtali and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, and the Negev, and the plain in the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees as far as Zoar. That is what Moses was looking forward to as he took in this final visual feast of the Promised Land, a piece of real estate he would never set his feet upon. And that was it. God wanted him home. Then the Lord said to him, "This is the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there." So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab according to the word of the Lord. Moses gave up the spirit. Whether we are heroes or not, we will all reach the point in our lives when we must abandon the body and pass on to another realm. Two different messages spring from this. The aloneness of death. Not its loneliness, but its aloneness. There's a difference. Loneliness suggests an empty longing, reaching in vain for someone else. Aloneness means nobody else goes along. That is what I see here. It's a solo flight. You never take a companion along when you travel through death. You go all alone. Everything is great, just as long as we don't have to be alone. Perhaps that's what makes death so frightening to some. We are so seldom alone. On the other hand, Moses is all by himself atop Mount Pisgah. Joshua was not allowed to accompany them in any way, and Aaron had long since disappeared. On the rocky trek to the peak, where there was no discernible trail, there was just one solitary figure to be seen. The next thing that springs up is the security of death. Moses died according to the word of the Lord. The man's life came to an end precisely how God had planned it out all along. Moses passed away by himself, but in peace. The account of his passing is contained within the final 6 verses of the book of Deuteronomy chapter 34. Death has a way of putting things in proper perspective, doesn't it? What a way to live! 120 and you don't need glasses. A century and a fifth and you don't need crutches. Moses never did sit around in a rocking chair rubbing on liniment and drinking Ensure. You can't help but wonder, did those Hebrews who often grumble about him adore him? Or was he just a convenient target who served as a lightning rod for their discontent? Were they inclined to think of him as some kind of distant, profound man of God? The answer is found in verse 8 when he died. Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 8. So the sons of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. Oh, how the Israelites will miss their late leader's wise counsel. His work among them stirred their emotions to such a degree that it took an entire month for them to mourn his passing after he had left them. But finally that mourning came to an end. That ought to be true in our own lives. After a death comes a burial, and so it was in the case of Moses. But verse 6 contains one of the most remarkable statements about the whole remarkable career of Moses. Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 6. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no man knows where his burial place is to this day. Moses is the only person in the Bible whom God personally buried. Did you realize that? The Lord then hid the tomb. What made him do that? Because that grave would have been turned into a shrine. They'd still be beating a path up Nebo today, erecting shrines, selling popcorn and peanuts, offering various rides, and maybe even running a tram up there with big banners proclaiming Moses' burial place. So it was concealed. This was so crucial to the Lord that it even sparked an angelic confrontation. Jude verse 9 contains one of the stranger accounts in the Bible concerning this event. Jude writes, But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil, Satan, and arguing about the body of Moses, did not dare bring an abusive condemnation against him, but simply said, The Lord rebuke you. It would appear that the devil had his own ideas about what he could do with Moses' body, but God responded, Never. I claim ownership of his body in the same manner that I do his soul, and I intend for the grave to remain undiscovered for all time. The end of the story. All things have their proper wrap-up, as does the story of Moses. Since that time, there has not been another prophet who has arisen in Israel who is comparable to Moses, whom the Lord personally knew. This is due to all of the miracles and signs that the Lord commanded Moses to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh, all of his servants, and the entirety of Pharaoh's land, as well as due to all of the great terror and mighty power that Moses displayed in front of all of Israel. Famous French historian and philologist Joseph Renan once said of Moses, "He is a colossus among figures of humanity." Renan was referring to Moses. The majority of us, when we read this portion of the epitaph and think about all of the enormous strength and of all the miracles that Moses did, have a tendency to think that Moses is in a league of his own. I can't touch him. This life, I've observed, amounts to just another theoretical study. It almost mocks me, because I'm not like Moses. Moses was clearly one of a kind, but at the end of the day, he was just a man serving God. Nonetheless, we can derive a great deal of personal gain from learning about his life and passing.